Hello, I'd like to welcome you to Kevina Talk once again. My name is Kevina. I am a nutritionist, an educationist, and a motivational speaker. In this video, I'd like us to talk about something very important. Let's talk about the glycemic index. Okay, the glycemic index is a very important tool and it helps us to know which carbohydrates are good for us. Okay. Now in this video, I'm going to start by defining what glycemic index is, and then at the end of this video, I believe that we shall be able to choose foods that are good for our health. All right. Moving forward, glycemic index is a tool that is used to rank foods according to their effect on our blood sugar levels. Okay, now according to the International Organization of Standardization, okay, the GI is ranked on a scale of 1 to 10 using pure glucose as the reference food. Okay, it has a GI of 100. All right, now it is done on a level of high to low, whereby a food that has a high GI has has a glycemic index of 70 and above. Then that is considered moderate, ranges from 56 to 69, whereas a low glycemic index is from 1 to 55. Okay, now why is the glycemic index very important? It helps us to know what happens to our blood sugar levels after we have taken a meal. Okay, now this is what happens after we've ingested food. It gets digested in the stomach and in the small intestine, and for carbohydrates specifically, the end product of digestion is glucose, okay, which gets released into the bloodstream, thereby affecting the levels of glucose in blood. Okay, now this is what happens. Foods that have a high glycemic index after ingestion will cause a rapid increase in the level of glucose. Okay, and shortly after that, there will be a rapid decline in the level of glucose. Why that happens is because there is a hormone called insulin, okay, which is secreted by the pancreas, and insulin is very important, okay, when it comes to controlling the levels of sugars in our blood. Okay, now insulin, what it does, it has two main effects. One, it stimulates the cells to take up glucose, okay, and then two, it stimulates the conversion of excess sugar, okay, to a form of sugar that can be stored. That is, the excess sugar is converted from glucose to glycogen for storage in the liver. Now, foods with a high glycemic index include ice cream, glucose itself, sugary foods like cakes, sugary drinks, and so on and so forth. Now, on the other hand, foods that have a low glycemic index, once they are ingested, okay, they cause a slow but steady increase in the level of blood sugars. Okay, now once you've ingested the food, the level of glucose in your blood is going to rise steadily, okay, up to a certain level, and after which it will also decrease very gradually. Now this is very important for your health because at any one point in time, your blood will be having a regulated amount of glucose, okay, which is very important. Now, such foods which have a low glycemic index include fruits, vegetables, okay, foods that contain starch, okay, such as potatoes, cassava, and then plus so many others. But one that I would like you to take note of is red wine. Okay, it's very good for your health, partly because of its low glycemic index. moving forward to a comparison between foods that have a low glycemic index and those that have a high glycemic index. Okay, after ingesting foods that have a low GI, okay, there'll be a gradual rise and a gradual fall in the level of sugars. Now, this is very important because the pancreas will also gradually release insulin, okay, slowly and in a sustainable way in order to control the changes in the levels of sugar. Okay, now that is very important for your health because since the pancreas is not being put on any pressures, to secrete insulin, you will not be at a risk of developing diabetes, and specifically diabetes type 2. Okay, and then also because of the low amounts of sugars, you'll have a better control over the levels of cholesterol in your blood. Okay, and then the low GI also is good for weight loss. Okay, and then overall, it is good for better pregnancy and birth outcomes. Now, on the other hand, foods that have a high GI, okay, ingestion of these foods is followed by a rapid rise and a rapid fall in the level of blood sugar. Now, when you ingest these foods, because of the rapid increase in the levels of sugar, the pancreas is burdened, okay, to keep secreting a lot of insulin every after a meal, okay, and this is dangerous because the pancreatic cells, can get destroyed, okay, and that will predispose you to development of type 2 diabetes. Okay, now apart from that, you will also be predisposed to weight gain, okay, because you have too much sugar in your blood after every meal, okay, which the body will convert to fat for storage. Okay, now as a result of weight gain, okay, there will be poor pregnancy and birth outcomes. Okay, now let's talk about just very fast, why do we actually need to consume foods that have low glycemic index? One, it's important for weight loss. Okay, it's important to control our levels of blood sugar, which is actually very important for the health of our hearts, okay, and for our pancreas, okay, which is actually protective against type 2 diabetes. And apart from that, it's also good for pregnancy outcomes and good birth outcomes. Okay, now let us look at the factors that can affect the glycemic index of food. Now, there are several factors, okay? So, one of them is the type of sugar. Now, we have different types of sugars, okay? We have simple sugars, and then we have the complex sugars. Now, the simple sugars include the monosaccharides and the disaccharides. An example of the monosaccharide is glucose. Now, these are called simple sugars because after ingestion, okay, they don't need a lot of time to be digested. Okay, now since they are actually simple, especially the monosaccharides, on ingestion they are straight away absorbed into the bloodstream, okay, causing a rapid increase in the levels of sugars. The same with the disaccharides, okay, because they are also simple in nature. It doesn't take a lot of time for the enzymes, to break these bonds so that you can have the monosaccharides which can actually be absorbed into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, on the other hand, the complex sugars include starch, glycogen, fiber. And one example of food which has which contains complex sugars is potatoes, and then we have rice, okay, and so on and so forth. Now, these foods, because of their complex nature, they take a lot of time to undergo digestion, okay, to be split down to units that can actually be absorbed in the bloodstream. Okay, now the simpler a sugar is, the higher the glycemic index, and the more complex a sugar is, the lower the GI. The other factor is processing. Now, processing simply increases the glycemic index of foods. For instance, juice has a higher glycemic index compared to the whole fruit. Okay. The other factor is the level of ripeness. Okay. For instance, a raw banana, okay, has a lower glycemic index compared to a banana that is overly ripe. Okay. The other factor is the method of food preparation. Okay. Methods that expose food on fire for long periods of time tend to raise the glycemic indices of foods. Okay. That is why it is important for you to prefer raw foods to cooked foods. Okay. Then the other one is the level of acidity. The lower the level of acidity, the higher the glycemic index. For instance, an orange has much more acid and therefore it has a lower glycemic index, whereas a banana has a low level of acidity and therefore it has a higher glycemic index. Then finally is the fiber content. Okay, now foods that are very high in fiber have lower glycemic indices, unlike foods that have a lot of fiber in them. Okay, now let's have a look at a sample of glycemic indices of various food groups. Okay, so we have the vegetables, like for asparagus it's 15, and then tomatoes also 15. Okay, now vegetables tend to have low GIs. Why? Because they are rich in fibers. Okay, and then when it comes to fruits, grape has a GI of only 25, cherries has only 22, which is actually very good for your health. Okay, now a fruit like the watermelon, okay, has a high glycemic index of up to 72. And then dates, on the other hand, actually has a very high GI, which is up to 100. Now, this does not mean that these fruits are not very healthy, because one, the type of sugars that they contain are not those that could actually predispose you to development of diabetes. Okay, these sugars, much as they are simple, okay, the total amount of carbohydrate that they contribute to your diet at the end of the day is actually low. And then the other aspect with fruits is that fruits have a lot of fiber, and they also have a number of vitamins and minerals which are actually good for our health. Then we have dairy products. Okay, low fat yogurt has a very low GI. Okay, whereas soy milk has a fairly, okay, it's also considered low because remember it's less than 30. And then when it comes to proteins have low to moderate GI. Okay, the peanuts, beans, chickpeas, black-eyed beans, okay, the GI are fair. Okay, so they are actually good for our diet. And then finally we have the grains or the starches. So we have brown rice with a GI of only 27. It's actually very good for your health. And then we have baked potatoes. Oh, we just talked about method of food preparation. Okay, we said when food is cooked, the GI tends to go up. So if you compare the glycemic index of sweet potatoes, which is actually fresh, is only 61. Okay, and then the one that is baked is already up to 85. Now this is clearly showing you that the glycemic index of food is highly dependent on processing. Okay, now with that background of the glycemic indices of several foods, so this is just what I would like us to get. Okay, So good foods for you to pick from whole foods. Okay, remember we said processing increases the glycemic index of food, so choose whole foods over highly processed foods. Okay, then maximize vegetable and fruits in your diet. Okay, and then take plenty of water. All right, now the bottom line is that in order for us to be very healthy, we need to consider eating a variety of foods. Okay, and when we mix foods which have high glycemic indices with those that have low glycemic indices, it is actually healthy. Okay, and then also uh, we need to be mindful of the sizes of the foods that we actually eat. Okay, the larger the portion size of your meals, the larger amounts of sugars that you will actually take. And then we need to maximize whole foods. And then finally, we need to make fruits and vegetables a part and parcel of our daily meals. Now, I hope after this presentation, we shall be able to choose clearly, okay, from an informed point of view, types of carbohydrates that are good for our health. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.